This is stripping a 1000 DS head, vertical head in this instance, for it to be reconditioned. So just pulling it apart, not much consideration for anything apart from that. Usually with the DS's, because you can't just push the opening rockers out of the way and spin the cams over like you can in an older traditional 2-valve, I just get the opening rockers out of the way. I put everything in a little container, vertical exhaust, vertical inlet, horizontal's already apart. Just keep it all together. All the rocker pins in these engines should just slide. No need for a slide hammer as such. 2 thin washers next to the opening rocker. Opening shim. Just push the rocker down. Spin the cam. Get the collets off. Shim off. And turn it over now, you can have a bit of a feel of the valve guide. It's done 60,000 Ks, so I guess the head shop will put a K line in the guide and just face and cut the seats. Pull the closing rocker out. Now the closing rockers have shims on either end, usually a fairly thick one, and on this engine, on the spring end of the exhaust closing rocker, there is this very thin sleeve that goes inside the spring, and the other shim is a traditional rocker shim, if you like, out of a 2-valve. It's about 2mm thick, but that's pretty standard. This one is a narrow wall one, and that's in the exhaust inside the spring. Go to the inlet. Again, we've got 1 thin washer, 2 thin washers. This is a Sport Classic engine, so it has an O-ring on the rocker pins, which is meant to seal the oil from around the rocker pins. They're completely useless. In the later engines, I just did away with them because there's no point being there. The later engines have a big square section O-ring around the outside of all these things to keep the oil in. These engines had O-rings here and O-rings on the cam end caps, and generally they leaked. I have gaskets that Krista at California Cycle Works got made that just put a gasket in the end like an older 2-valve, and it works really well. Oops, wrong tool. That's just an 8mm hex key. Works really nice. We lose a collet. Have to go looking. Yep, there it is. crispy collets. And you can pull the valve down and give it a wiggle. But 60,000 Ks, and once you get it clean, if you wash it, just this oil in the guide is enough to reduce the rocking. So if you really want to get a good idea of what the guides are like, you need to pull the seals off and then wash it all, make it dry. Now on the inlet, that's the traditional shim on the non-spring side, but on the spring side, on the inlet, they have the same shim. So it's only the exhaust that has the, you'd almost call it a bush, that goes inside the spring, whereas the inlets have two of the normal shim washers, one on each side. On my little 659 engine, I'm pretty sure that it didn't have any shims at all. I've got a video somewhere I'd never edited, but I think it didn't have any shims at all on either side of the rocker. I'll have a look. Now we just push the cam out. Not sure why they're so stiff. They should just slide through. And these are a plain bearing cam or a cam in head design, so that's the bearing journal there, and that is the other bearing journal. So that's why these heads have full oil pressure going to them, because they need it, otherwise the cam will eat into the head. And these are a 6V cam. Yep, V6V. This one would be 06V. Yep. Let's pop the cam seal out. So I'll put a new one of them in. Cam seal. Now to get the valve stem seals off, you often get a little bit medieval. The valve stem seal, this is one here, previously removed. These seals have a steel sleeve, but inside it's just rubber. The rubber just sticks to the valve guide. I usually spray these with silicone spray when I fit them, and that goes away pretty quick, and they just stick there. So even though it's just a rubber thing pushed over a piece of steel or brass, they can be very, very hard to get off. So you can lever them with a screwdriver like I have here, which gives you a lever to push off. Sometimes you have to just lever them and tear the steel all apart till it's all gone, and then they'll come off. And sometimes you can just get some pliers on the end and start wiggling it around and it'll just pop off. So first thing to do, I just spray some sort of penetrant around them to try and make it work. I'm not sure if I can really show this particularly well. It's much easier doing it on a stand because then the head can't move around, but it makes it hard to show things. We'll see if it just wiggles around. If it's a case of wiggling it, you can just wiggle them around, and if you can get the penetrant to get inside the rubber, then they will just come off. Oops. Sorry, camera. Or they might do that. In which case, what I often do is get a flat-bladed screwdriver like so and stick it down in there and lever the seal up. And this one has moved with me wiggling it around with the pliers. It's going to come off fairly easily. But if you can imagine a much more aggressive version of that, when it hasn't moved at all, and you can just sort of tear it up and rip it off. Where'd the old one go? So I'll try this one. These ones are coming off quite easily. Some of the 4-valve ones can be a real nightmare. Sort of wiggle and rock and twist and all that. I might just lever it off with the screwdriver, which is a bit boring for you because you can't see what I'm doing, which might be a good thing. It gets a bit medieval at times, but it is the best way, or easiest way in my experience, to get them off. There we go. They were pretty easy to get off. Some of the Desmo Quattro ones are much harder. And that's it. Head stripped. There is a plug here that I tend not to remove. The oil galleries, oil is fed in here. Then there's a drilling that goes across this way to this side, and then this hole here is drilled down at an angle into that one. And that's what feeds the high pressure oil to the end of the cam. And the cam gets high pressure oil on the end, which feeds this bearing, gets fed through center of the cam and out that hole to the other bearing, to that surface there. That's the other cam bearing. That's what lubricates it all. These two holes here are just return holes, and they come out. There's one there and there's one up there. And that shiny surface you can see there is the thrust surface of the cam. And the cam gets pushed hard up against the right hand side of the head. That's what locates the cam. And the full oil pressure between this cover and the big end of the cam is what forces the cam to the right hand side. If you want to pull that plug out, you can. It is just aluminium, little aluminium M6 screw. I tend to leave it there because realistically there's not going to be any debris in there. It's had hot high pressure oil going through it, and hot high pressure oil tends to clean everything out of its way. So it won't be dirty. You just need to make sure that when you're cleaning it, you need to get out anything you put in there. This is the cylinder head from my little 659 engine, which is our short stroke and illegal 696. That's going to go into the Monster Special. This is the horizontal head. You can tell that because the fins are vertical. And I'm just going to start reassembling it. One of the things I'd normally do with the older engines at this point is I put the closing rockers in, and then I would check the shimming side to side, but these ones don't have any shims on the sides of the closing rockers, which is very nice. Makes it much quicker. The first thing I'm going to do is fit the valve stem seals. This is just the typical 7mm sprung valve stem seal. I use this little tool that I made years ago. You can buy a special tool to do it from Ducati. I usually spray some HHS 2000 just on that bit. So when the seal goes over it, it doesn't go on dry. And a bit of silicone spray in the bottom. And a bit of HHS down the guide. So everything's nicely lubricated. It might push on, or I might need to belt it. I think it's just pushed on. Often they do. And you can tell, if you look from the other side, usually, if it's all the way down or not. That appears to be all the way down. Spin around to the exhaust side and do exactly the same thing. Bit of HHS on my little installing tool. Bit of silicone spray in there. Oh, it's a bit harder on this side. Oh, maybe it's on. Oh, I think it's all the way down. Let's pull it off and have a look. As you look in, see it appears to be all the way down. So that's the valve stem seals in. And the closing rockers, I'm going to use this tool, which is the old 2-valve tool. We've got our closing rocker and our spring. I usually like to spray some bit of HHS or some oil down inside there. I usually spray a little bit into the head itself. Get our pin for our closing rocker. And we'll just slide the pin in there to start with. They should slide in there nicely, these pins. You can see this little groove here that on the earlier ones had a O-ring in it. And on this engine, which is a 696 base, they did away with the O-rings, and the cam end cap that goes on here now has a big square section ring around it. So you don't need to worry about the little O-rings on this one. So we'll see if this tool will work. It should, because the rockers... Ow! Having trouble getting it in. Hurting my hands. The rockers are actually the same as the earlier engines. Maybe the springs are different, because this is very hard to get in here. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, frankly. Okay, so we've got the rocker in the tool. Hopefully, put it in there, push down to sort of get the tail of the closing bit down and in, so we can push the whole thing down. This doesn't work anything like the earlier ones. I can't work out why I'm having so much trouble with this. There we go. Push the rocker all the way in. So I don't know why I had so much trouble with that, but sometimes you just do. It's hard to know sometimes, but it's in. Maybe there's a better tool for these ones where the tail of the rocker sits, sort of interferes with the bottom of the tool. You have to get that bit of the closing rocker sort of out and in so you can push it back into the head that way. But I didn't do that very well. Anyway, as I pop the opening rocker in over here, bit of lubricant inside there. I've already put some lube in the head. Oh, there's 2 shims that go on the opening rocker pin, and these shims go either side of the spring clip that keeps the rocker in position. So put those on first, and this one will sit over that side, so the washers go on first. And all the way in. And there we go. 2 rockers in. Spin him around. Okay, we'll see how I go this side with the inlet. Bit of, which way is the rocker going to go? That way. Bit of HHS 2000. Spring on the rocker. I've never had them be so difficult before. Maybe they've changed the closing spring or something, and it's just a heavier spring. I don't know. Wow. This is really strange. So putting it on the bench will help. There we go. That's loaded. We'll spray some HHS to the bores. Pop the pin in. We'll poke the tail of the rocker down and then try and pull it forward a bit. See if that lets us get it in a bit easier. There we go. And now it's in, but the tail has to go over there, and I'm not sure this tool's going to make that work. Try and get a screwdriver in and see if I can, because if we miss the spring going where it's meant to, oh, there we went. So the spring is on its little, there's a cast in shoulder here to hold the spring. There we go. Push the pin all the way in. Opening rocker, again, bit of HHS in there. This time the 2 shims will go on after the rocker is in, because the rocker gets held this side of the head. So rocker in. There's my magnet. I'll hold them with the magnet. And in they go. Okay, that's our rockers in. Next is the camshaft.